Hi, my name is Leanne Bostic. Joining me today is Elaine Taylor. It is March 24th, 2009. Thank you, Elaine, for being with us today and sharing your memories.
I'm glad to be here, Leanne. What may I tell you?
Where and when were you born, and where did you grow up?
I'm a native of Mount Airy, Maryland, in Carroll County. In 1935, I was born at the Frederick Memorial Hospital, the only hospital in the area. I have lived in Mount Airy on the suburbs of Mount Airy my entire life.
Okay. Where have you lived?
I have always lived along Ridge Road, north of the town. I lived on a farm for 21 years, and then I moved just a few feet away and have lived there since.
Haven't you lived in 3 different houses on the ridge?
I have lived in 3 houses,
All on the ridge.
all on the ridge.
What kind of jobs have you had, and what do you do for a living now?
I'm retired now, and in the past I have been a registered nurse, working in the local doctor's office and occasionally doing private duty in homes and in hospitals.
How did your parents make a living?
My parents were farmers. We had a good-sized farm. They were on the ridge, and they were well known for dairy farming and beef farming. Excuse me.
So they raised beef cattle and dairy cattle.
Dairy cattle. We also had chickens and pigs.
All right. Did your family stay in one place?
Yes. I would say probably within a 10-mile radius the entire life of my parents. And I'm within about a mile and a half from my home place.
Okay, how did your parents come to live here?
Well, this was just the area that was settled by ancestors, and no one ever strayed very far from home. My paternal great-great-grandparents came to the United States from Germany and landed in Philadelphia and gradually came into the Baltimore area, having a bakery and then coming out into the Frederick County area. They were very active in establishing the Locust Grove Church of the Brethren, which is in Frederick County.
Do you have any stories that have come down to you from your grandparents or your parents?
Both of my grandfathers had a rather dramatic, I guess you could call it, death. My maternal grandfather had appendicitis, and he was brought into Mount Airy in what was called a spring wagon, which was very primitive, bumpy ride. And he was put on the train at the train station in town, taken to the hospital in Baltimore, where he died. My paternal grandfather was a farmer and was killed by a team of runaway horses with a manure spreader. Not a pleasant sight. I do not remember it. I was only about 2 or 3 years old at the time.
Wow. What are some of your childhood memories?
Well, of course, I have a lot of memories of farm life. The kitties in the barn, the pigs, the chickens. Sometimes the experiences were not fun because it was my chore to gather the eggs and feed the chickens and carry the water. We also had a wood stove, and it was one of my chores to carry in the wood for the stove. I enjoyed riding the workhorse when the gardens were plowed. Wasn't exactly like riding a riding horse, but it was fun for a child. There was new life when the calves and piglets were born. That was a thrill for a child.
Um,
And of course, my best childhood memory was my dear friend and companion, a St. Bernard dog named Pat. He was my constant companion and guard.
wasn't he like the size of you?
At one point, he was much larger than I was. I had to grow into him.
Excuse me. What kind of games did you and your friends play?
Well, at school, one of our favorite games was around a huge tree in the playground. And with stones, we would build divisions for a house, and each of us had a room or to play in. We gathered acorns, leaves, and things like that to play with at lunchtime, and we also had a recess time that we would play there. As a young child, I'm sure dolls were a favorite toy, a favorite teddy bear who was always at my side. We had dominoes, a few card games as a child. Then board games like Pachisi and checkers we played. Paper dolls.
Could you say that you made some of the toys?
Well, we improvised, yes. Like the stones and the leaves and the acorns, they were our way. And grandparents would make dolls or doll clothes for us. Bought toys were not too plentiful. Some children played with corn cobs for dolls.
Ah. What kind of home entertainment was there? Like, was there a radio?
There was a radio, and there were games, programs like Amos and Andy that the family would gather around on a regular schedule to listen to. There might be some musical programs that we listened to. TV was not in my home until I was a teenager.
Were there any different craft traditions?
Most girls learned to embroidery at an early age. We also learned to stitch doll clothes, and at a fairly early age, I was taught to make my own dresses. And boys learned to work on the farm and wood crafts with their fathers.
How are holidays traditionally celebrated in your family?
Well, my family was very small and we all lived very close, so my aunt and her children usually came to our house for Christmas and other holidays.
And how are they celebrated now?
Very much the same way. My children and grandchildren live nearby, and we have a celebration several times a week when we get together for dinner. Our holidays are just a little enlargement of our weekday meetings.
What holidays would you say are the most important to your family?
Well, we always celebrate each family's birthday. We do it by the month. So if there are 3 birthdays in a month, we have one big get-together for a birthday. Christmas, everyone comes to my house. And roast beef is our traditional Christmas meal rather than turkey.
Is there any special family traditions that you do at these holiday parties?
Well, we like Christmas stockings, big ones with all kinds of goodies in. When they're not hung by the chimney, everyone's a little disappointed. Sometimes we hunt Easter eggs.
How did these traditions come about in your family?
I really don't know. It's just always been that way. And that's what everybody looks forward to, and we don't have any desire to change it.
Everybody's grown up with it.
Hmm.
Okay.
And it carries on from generation to generation.
And how many generations are there in your family?
I have a great-grandson expecting a great-granddaughter at the present time, and I have 4 granddaughters. No grandsons.
You only have a great-grandson.
Right.
Okay.
I had 2 sons and a daughter.
And are they married off?
They are married and live nearby.
Okay. Does your family hold reunions?
Nothing other than our usual get-togethers. There are not many surviving members of my family.
Are there any kind of stories that are told about your life when you were younger or your children's lives when they were younger that are told at these events?
Well, my children like to tell stories about each other and poke a little fun at each other about who did what to who and what they think I didn't know they were doing. We always talk, and with the younger generation, we talk about school events. Church events are important to the family, and we talk about changes we have seen in our churches, in our church activities, and our hopes for the future.
Do you have any family heirlooms or keepsakes that have been passed down in your family?
I have a German Bible that was brought by the German ancestors from Germany on the ship. It's written in German, so my daughter, after taking German in school, could read some of it. But before that, there were POWs, which were prisoners of war from Germany, working on a nearby farm. They were able to read it to us.
Of
course, we have needlework and quilts, those things that are treasured that were made by ancestors.
Can you describe the place where you grew up in? Like, what was it like? How's it changed over the years? And what brought about these changes?
I was raised on a 168-acre farm, which is now Falling Green, a development. It seems that they've moved the land around and the roads are not where they were when we traveled up and down the hill with tractors and wagons. The barn is no longer there. The house has been renovated and greatly enlarged. There, life centered in the kitchen. The family kitchen was the center of most homes as I grew up. The kitchen table was a very important part. Meals were served there after they had been prepared on that table because many kitchens did not have counter space. Homework was done there. Games were played there. The sewing and cutting out of patterns was centered on that kitchen table. Dishes were washed on that table in a dish pan and a drainer before there were kitchen sinks. Cookies were rolled out on those tables. That was And in that kitchen was a wood stove, which required the wood to be carried in daily. It kept the kitchen warm, many times heated the upstairs bedrooms. If you'd been out and were cold, it was great to back up to and keep warm, or you might open that oven door and pull up a chair and prop your feet on the oven door. Some stoves had a tank on the end, and that's where the water was heated for your work. Some had a warming cabinet over the stove where they kept things warm.
Did you have any other brothers or sisters?
I was an only child. So my cats and dogs were my friends, my companions.
What were your neighbors like back then?
Neighbors were all farmers, and as farmers they worked together. Sometimes they bought large pieces of equipment together like a combine, or one farmer would buy one piece of equipment, the next farmer would buy something else, and then they worked together. They would move from one farm to the other. When the wheat was to be harvested, they did this farmer's, and then they moved on to the next. They helped with the haymaking. When it was time to butcher, they worked together with the butcherings, or the apple butter making, all of those things.
What kind of local gatherings did you and the people in your neighborhood and the people that lived around you, what did you guys do? Did you do anything together?
Well, ladies had quilting bees.
And what is that exactly?
That's where they would come to one lady's house, and there would be a quilt in a frame, and they would do the quilting with a fine needle and then roll it and do another row. And they might do this once a month. Sometimes they did it once a week. And they would go from one house to the other, and this is how quilts for their bedding was made. They also the women would help with the large meals that were necessary when there were butcherings and harvesting. Church activities were pretty much the center of your social activity. You know, there would be a youth group or a men's Bible study, pretty much like we have today. There was a small movie theater in town, and we would go to the movies in there for 25 cents. Then,
Like today.
not like today. Then when I was a teenager, as all teenagers, we wanted to branch out, and then we would go into Frederick to a movie theater, maybe to Westminster. And by the time I was a senior in high school, we were brave enough and we would venture down Route 40 to the Edmondson Village area. And there was a drive-in movie. So, and a drive-in eatery called Pig and Whistle. So, and then at school there were a few dances, and the prom was a big deal, but it was held in the gym at school. We didn't go off to Martin's or any place. We might go to the Pig and Whistle after the prom for a snack, but
What school did you go to?
I went to school in Mount Airy all 12 years in one building. As I guess I was a junior maybe, and there was an addition put on, and that was used for elementary school. We did not have what we call middle school and high school now. We did call grades 7, 8, and 9 junior high, and in the 7th grade, then we began to have classes and for different subjects. It wasn't all taught by one teacher.
Um, were there any historical events that happened in your town or in Carroll County that affected your family or the way your family lived their lives?
Well, you perhaps wonder why Mount Airy is called Mount Airy. Mount Airy became a corporated town in 1894, and it really became a more prominent and a growing settlement because it was a railroad center. The B&O Railroad came from Baltimore going westward, and some of these Irish workmen said, "Mighty airy here, ought to call this place Mount Airy." So it became known as Mount Airy when it was incorporated. There was a tuberculin sanitarium in Mount Airy, and children were brought out of the city to live there in the summer, and their parents would come to visit from the train on the train. So that was important in the town. Uh, a It was a highlight, or a large chicken hatchery, and millions of baby chicks were hatched in Mount Airy.
Was there anything really? Is there anything that just is interesting about how things have changed from when you were younger to now when your grandchildren are younger?
When I was a child, it was strictly a rural community. It has now become a bedroom community with many people, or most people, commuting for an hour or more each day for their job. We have large developments now where previously they were scattered far apart. In the past, if you went into town, you knew everyone. Today, you go into town and see no one that you know by name.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Mount Airy's a great town to live in.
Did you like living in Carroll County for 73 years?
Yes. I don't know much of other town areas, but Carroll County has been described as America in miniature.
Wow. Thank you, Miss Elaine, for sharing your memories with us today.
You're welcome.